city of Hamburg, on the northwest coast of Germany, was a busy port. In its large harbor were to be found sailing vessels from all parts of the world. Here, on sunny afternoons, little Johannes Brahms would wander along the waterfront, deciphering the strange names on the ships and dreaming of the far-off lands from which they came. Johannes lived in a dingy tenement near the waterfront. His father was an impoverished musician who played the double bass in a restaurant orchestra. Jakob Brahms had taught his son to play several instruments: the horn, the flute, the violin. He was astonished at how quickly the boy learned anything that had to do with music. Before long, Jakob decided that his son needed more thorough instruction than he could give him. When Johannes was 7 years old, Jakob took him to the studio of Otto Kossel, one of the finest teachers in Hamburg. "Herr Professor," he said, "I think my boy has a real talent for music. Johannes, turn around." The youngster turned his back to the piano. "What is this note?" "D," Johannes replied without hesitation. "And this one?" "F sharp. And this?" "B flat." The professor was impressed. "Herr Brahms, your child has absolute pitch. I think we can make a musician out of him." "There is one problem, Herr Professor." Jakob stopped short, embarrassed. I don't earn very much with my playing, and I am not sure that I will be able to pay the full fee. Perhaps—" "Herr Brahms, do not worry. Your boy is extremely gifted. You will not have to pay for the lessons." One other problem had to be solved. There was no piano in Jakob's apartment. Where was Johannes to practice? His teacher let him practice on his piano, but that was not enough. One day, Johannes had an excellent idea. He stopped in at a piano store not far from his home. A little old man was working on one of the instruments. "What do you want?" he asked the boy. Johannes was so eager that he forgot his usual timidity. "I'm taking lessons with Herr Kossel, and we have no piano at home, and I wondered if you would let me—" He stopped short, afraid to finish the sentence. The old man smiled. "I see, my boy. Play something for me." When Johannes left the store that afternoon, he was very happy indeed. He had received permission to come every day and practice on a fine instrument that stood in the rear of the store. Unfortunately, things were not going well at home. Jakob's earnings were not sufficient to support the family. When Johannes was 9 years old, he began to play in the dance halls near the waterfront. Often he sat pounding the piano far into the night. But he was happy to be able to help his parents, and he learned to love the popular dance rhythms that many years later echoed through his waltzes. Before long, Johannes's life took a turn for the better. He gave a concert that made a fine impression on the musicians of Hamburg, and he became the accompanist for a Hungarian violinist named Eduard Remenyi. He never forgot the Hungarian gypsy melodies that he heard Remenyi play. They became the basis for his own Hungarian dances. In these delightful pieces, he captured the sudden shifting of tempo from slow to fast that is so characteristic of Hungarian popular music. Remenyi made one other contribution to Johannes's career. He introduced his young accompanist to Joseph Joachim, the most famous violinist of the time. A deep friendship developed between the two musicians. It was for Joachim that Johannes later wrote his violin concerto. In this majestic work, Johannes extended the technique of the violin, for he required the player to perform difficult passages such as had never before been presented to a violinist. Many composers had treated the concerto as a solo piece, with the orchestra in the background. But Johannes had another conception of what a concerto should be. He wanted the closest possible relationship between the solo instrument and the orchestra, with a continual interchange of ideas between them. It was almost as though he were writing a symphony with a part for the solo violin. Joachim was profoundly impressed by his friend's talent. He wrote about Johannes to Robert and Clara Schumann, who were then living in Düsseldorf on the Rhine River. Schumann was one of the foremost composers of the day, and his wife Clara was a celebrated pianist. When Johannes decided to take a short trip along the Rhine, Joachim made him promise to stop off at Düsseldorf and visit the Schumanns. This visit was destined to be a turning point in the young composer's life. The blue-eyed, golden-haired youth duly presented himself at the home of the Schumanns. Robert Schumann was eager to hear his music. Suddenly, Schumann jumped up and threw open the door. "Clara, come here quickly!" A beautiful woman in her middle 30s hurried into the room. "You must hear this, my dear. It is quite extraordinary. Music like this you have never heard before." Johannes captured their hearts. Robert and Clara took him into their home and made him feel like one of the family. His friendship with these two great artists opened up a new world for Johannes, and Schumann wrote an article about the young eagle, as he called him, who is destined to express our time in its highest, most ideal form. The article was published in Schumann's magazine on music, which was one of the most influential in Europe. The young man from the Hamburg tenements awoke to find himself famous. Johannes returned to Hamburg for Christmas. He brought his parents a gift that made their hearts swell with pride: his first printed compositions that had been accepted by the publishers on Schumann's recommendation. His mother, whom Johannes adored, gazed at him in wonder, and Jakob proudly informed the musicians who played with him at the restaurant, "Just think, my boy is going to be a great composer. Schumann himself said so." Johannes wrote to his friend Joachim, "My parents, my teachers, and myself are in seventh heaven, and I can only wish that you have spent the holiday season as gloriously as we did." Brahms was one of the great piano composers of the 19th century. He loved the piano above all other instruments and wrote for it some of his most eloquent music. He was especially fond of the short lyric piece that he called Intermezzo, the Italian word for an interlude. In his hands, the Intermezzo became an imaginative and highly expressive composition. Brahms also cultivated the Capriccio. The Italian word means a caprice, a whim. His capriccios are whimsical little pieces full of fantasy, bright and gay. Before the year was out, tragic news arrived from Düsseldorf. Schumann had had a mental breakdown and had to be placed in a sanitarium. Young Brahms hurried to Clara's side to help her through the ordeal. She embarked on a concert tour, for she needed money to cover the cost of Schumann's illness. Brahms remained behind to look after her children, toward whom he felt like an older brother. Shortly afterward, Schumann died, and Brahms was swept by the great love of his life. He worshipped Clara, both as a woman and as an artist, but she felt that she was too old for him, and she knew him well enough to realize that he was not made for marriage. Much as he longed for love and happiness, he prized his freedom even more. Their love for each other subsided into a lifelong devotion. Years later, he was still able to write to her, "I love you more than myself, and more than anybody and anything on earth." Toward the end of his life, when a misunderstanding threatened to come between them, he wrote to her, "Today, you must allow me to repeat to you that you and your husband represent the most beautiful experience of my life, that you stand for its greatest wealth and noblest meaning." Now that he was beginning to make a name for himself, he hoped to find a position in his native city. At this time, the conductor of the Hamburg Symphony Orchestra retired from his post. Brahms had every right to expect that he would be appointed as the new conductor. But the directors of the orchestra could not forget that he had grown up in the slum district near the waterfront and passed him by. Brahms, deeply hurt, decided to leave Hamburg. He went to Vienna, the musicians' holy city, he called it, for it had been the city of Haydn and Mozart, Beethoven and Schubert. He loved Vienna for the rest of his life. The Viennese musicians made him feel welcome. They realized that his great gifts would add luster to their city. Their appreciation consoled him for the indifference of Hamburg. Brahms frequently appeared in concerts, playing his own works. For a time, he conducted a choral group in Vienna, but he was reluctant to accept any duties that might interfere with his creative work, and soon resigned his post. From then on, he devoted himself completely to composing. His friends often said to him, "Why don't you write a symphony?" "Not until I am ready," he would answer. He regarded the symphony as the highest form of music and felt that it was not to be undertaken lightly. Not until he was at the height of his powers did he write his first symphony. Brahms' First Symphony made a tremendous impression on the musical world. His admirers called it the 10th, to show that this noble work was the true successor to Beethoven's 9th. The time was ripe for Brahms. His fame filled the world, and he was hailed everywhere as one who was carrying on the classical tradition of the masters of the past. Brahms remained a bachelor all his life. When his friends urged him to marry, he would say, "I am in love with music. I think of nothing else, or if I do, it is only if it can heighten the beauty of music for me." Although he had no children of his own, he had a great love for children, especially poor children, who reminded him of his own childhood. On his daily walk, he always carried a bag full of candies and a pocket full of coins, which he shared with his little friends. For them, he wrote one of the world's loveliest lullabies. Brahms wrote his second symphony while he was staying near a lovely lake in southern Austria. To a friend he wrote, "The air here is so full of melodies flying around that one must be careful not to step on them." He captured something of the smiling countryside in this gracious, serenely lyrical work. The opening movement is an allegro non troppo, not too fast. In contrast, the third symphony opens in a heroic mood. The first movement is an allegro con brio, fast with vigor. In Beethoven's symphonies, the Scherzo is an impetuous, strongly rhythmic movement. Brahms substituted for the Scherzo a lyrical movement in a moderate tempo. The Allegretto of his third symphony is an impassioned, darkly colored song for orchestra. It is the third movement. The cellos sing one of Brahms' most inspired melodies. The master's fourth and last symphony is a glorious outpouring of song. Its first movement is an allegro non troppo in which one lyric theme follows another. These works brought Brahms many honors. He was decorated by the Austrian emperor and received an honorary degree from the University of Breslau. Since he had never had the opportunity to attend college, he was very proud of this degree and loved it when he was addressed as Dr. Brahms. Even his native Hamburg made amends for its earlier treatment of him and conferred upon him its greatest honor, the freedom of the city. At this time, too, festivals were organized in various cities for the express purpose of presenting his music. his way back from one of these festivals, Brahms stopped over at Frankfurt for a visit with Clara. A wave of tenderness passed over him at sight of her. It was as if the years had rolled back and he was once more a fair-haired youth coming to her house for the first time. I'm told that you had a great triumph, dear Johannes. There was pride in her voice. I hear also that people nowadays are speaking of the 3 Bs: Bach, Beethoven, Brahms. Oh, Clara, you know that I am not worthy to be placed beside those masters. She smiled at him tenderly. You don't have to worry about that, Johannes. The future will decide that. All I know is that everything Robert and I dreamed of for you has come to pass. You are one of the great ones. And who knows, perhaps in the future the world will remember you as one of the 3 Bs, the descendant of Bach and the worthy heir of Beethoven. Clara's prediction came true. Today, Johannes Brahms is revered as one of the masters, and his warm-hearted music continues to delight the world.